Well, hi, church. Obviously, you're now aware that with the relaxation of the government guidelines, at last, after 16 months, we as a church can meet together in person, and we're all looking forward to that hugely. But undoubtedly, as we change the style of what we're doing, questions will arise. This is the first time we as a whole church have been able to gather together for a long time, and undoubtedly people will have questions, particularly about COVID and what we're doing about that. Now, the government have not put any restrictions, any constraints on churches, much like anything else really, about what we can do and how we do it. The emphasis from the government has been very much now on personal responsibility. And that's the same kind of approach that we are taking to Life Church Petersfield. We as a church are not going to mandate things, but we are going to implore each of us to exercise our personal responsibility. We are choosing to celebrate and exercise our freedom. It was for freedom that Christ has set us free, no longer to be subject to the yoke of slavery. We need to celebrate that freedom. Christ set us free. And the whole point in that passage is that if Christ has set us free, don't start burdening yourself with extra things that are man-made, that weigh you down, that chain you up. So we want to celebrate and enjoy that freedom that we've been given. But likewise, we have to recognise that we are part of something bigger. We're not all islands. We don't just live in our own little bubble. As we gather together more as a church, as we gather together more as society, we live within the context of the church and as the society. And we have to have some personal responsibility. Just because we are free doesn't mean we can do absolutely anything. Yes, it was for freedom that Christ has set us free, and we mustn't put on unnecessary constraints because Christ has freed us. But to be part of society, to be part of the bigger picture, does come with some responsibilities as well as freedom. So each of us needs to make our own decisions. These are personal decisions, personal responsibility in the context of us together. So there's a personal element and a corporate element. I like to think of this in two bits. There is a risk that when we gather together, that you might, unfortunately, catch a virus. Now that is true of COVID, of all sorts of viruses. It is true in a church context or other locations, whether that's work, the shops, school, or even at home. There is a risk. You could still catch the virus. It's not gone away, it's still there. And if you're happy with that risk, then great. That's easy. If you're not happy with quite being so open on that risk, then there are some things that you can do to reduce the risk. Not to remove it entirely, but to reduce it. Whether that is hand sanitising or social distancing, just keeping away from people a little bit more, etc. These kind of things do reduce the risk of you contracting the virus. The vaccination, it doesn't remove the risk entirely, but it does reduce it, and reduces the chance of serious complications, hospitalisation, etc. So that's about receiving the virus. But there's also a risk that you might unwittingly transmit the virus to other people. And I'm sure you would agree that that's not something any of us would want to do, is to pass on a virus to our nearest and dearest, our friends, our family, our church, our society, our town. Again, if that is a risk you are happy to accept in your conscience, etc., then that's great. But again, there are some things that you can do to reduce that risk. Now, most importantly is, if you're not well, please just don't come to church for a week or two or however long it takes. And that's not a COVID thing, that's just a normal common sense public health thing. If you're not well, don't go near other people and spread your unwellness to other people. Thank you. But there are also some other things you can do. Face masks. Face masks are not there to protect you, they're to protect other people. That if you might have the virus and you don't know it, you're not symptomatic, it just puts a little bit of barrier between you and other people so that the chance of you transmitting to other people are reduced. Again, social distancing, just keeping a little bit away from other people, just means that you can't pass it on so easily if you happen to have it. And again, vaccination does reduce the risk, doesn't remove it at all, but it does reduce it, the chance of passing it on. So really, when we gather together, the approach is, you don't have to wear a mask, but if you want to wear a mask out of respect for other people and to reduce the risk of you transmitting, unwittingly, a virus to other people, then please do. And if other people are wearing masks and you don't want to, that's fine, but respect that. Please, let us all be gracious. We all have different ways of looking at these things, different acceptance of the risks, different viewpoints and opinions. But at the end of the day, let grace abound. God came to give us and show us his grace. It is for us to show that grace to others, to love others, to respect others, to prefer others. So let us all do what we can to gather together, mitigate the risks, reduce the risks where appropriate, take our own personal responsibility in the context of church and the wider society, and let God's grace abound. And then we can celebrate our freedom to worship God together, to pray together, to see God move in our midst together as we now continue our journey out of a pandemic world into the bright new world, the new wine and the new wineskins that God has for us moving forwards. So I really look forward to seeing you all in person as soon as possible and see what God does. God bless.